shit.
Welcome to our trash revolution.
I'm so upset. Oh my God.
The guy!
Oh, is it Wednesday? I think it is. I think you're going to get 2.5 hours of Anna Solo, including the last 30 minutes behind a paywall for our members, tyt.com/join to become one. And if you're wondering, what is this? I just stumbled across this stream on YouTube or wherever you're watching us. You're watching the Young Turks. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we've got pretty decent show ahead for you all today. I only say decent because you're gonna get a lot of updates on stories we've been covering. I think a lot of American journalists are probably exhausted from that 2-hour-long State of the Union address last night where we were both lied to and didn't learn anything new. But the big question still remains, is the United States gonna go to war with Iran? We're going to start our show with that topic. We'll also talk a little bit about a damning investigation into the aid workers and rescue workers in Gaza who were very much intentionally shot and killed by IDF soldiers who knew exactly who they were, who knew that they were not enemy combatants, knew they weren't militants, but decided to shoot and kill them anyway. That is a difficult story to get through, but I do intend to do it. And I don't usually plug any of the work I do, but I'm on like approximately 58 different shows. So today I did go on a really great forum for the Quincy Institute. That's the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. They do really great work. And one of my favorite journalists, Murtaza Hussain, who writes over at Dropsite News. Previously, he was over at The Intercept. He was part of the conversation, and we talked about the Epstein files. So if you want to check that out, please do after you watch this show, of course. You can check it out on their YouTube channel. Just go over to the live tab, and then you'll see the conversation. Okay, without further ado, let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about the unfortunate uniparty situation we find ourselves dealing with when it comes to questions of war. Democratic leadership, once again, is showing us just how pathetic they really are as they work to literally block one of the most important resolutions that's being proposed by a fellow Democrat, Congressman Ro Khanna. Now, it's not just Ro Khanna. Congressman Thomas Massie, who is a Republican, libertarian really, has co-sponsored this resolution alongside Ro Khanna to ensure that the President of the United States cannot unilaterally decide to pursue military action without congressional approval. This is the way a system of checks and balances is supposed to work. And for everything that we hear from people like Chuck Schumer about how terrible it is that all this power is now concentrated in the executive branch, to me, it really appears as though he's one of the individuals who's trying to defeat this. And honestly, it seems like he's also a little excited about the prospect of going to war with Iran. You can judge for yourselves as I give you the details. Now, the resolution in question would again require explicit congressional authorization for any military action against Iran. I usually don't ask you to do this. I usually think that it's a fruitless effort. However, please hit up your congressperson and ask them to vote in favor of this resolution. Demand that it be brought to a vote. I don't know what's gonna happen in the Senate, but at least in the House, try to push for it. Try to push for it in the Senate, call your senators, call your representatives. But nonetheless, it would require every member of Congress to go on the record, okay, about a potential US war with Iran, which is something that many Democrats do not wanna do. They do not want to be on the record supporting something that President Donald Trump obviously wants to do, which is engage in, military intervention in a foreign country on behalf of Israel. So make them go on the record. Now, they're trying to undercut Kana and Massey's effort, and this is how they're going to do it. Now, this is a great report by Ida Chavez. She writes over at Substack. Previously, she was over at The Intercept, but here's what she says. A top Democratic House Foreign Affairs Committee staffer, multiple sources with direct knowledge tell me, deliberately inflated projections of opposition to the bipartisan measure, warning of 20 to 40 Democratic defections as part of a broader effort to dampen momentum and prevent the Iran war powers vote from advancing. Now, look, the word inflated or inflation, when it comes to those 20 to 40 Democratic people defecting from what Ro Khanna is trying to do here, I don't even know if it's really the right word. I would not be surprised, I gotta be honest with you, considering the fact that we have donors buying politicians on both sides of the political aisle. It would not surprise me at all if 20 to 40 Democrats would defect and would not sign on to this resolution. And that's a really sad realization that I came to a long time ago when it came to the Democratic Party. Yes, there are differences between the two parties when it comes to a whole host of social issues. They love the culture wars because that's where they can give this illusion of we're different from each other. The Democrats and Republicans couldn't be more different. But when it comes to neoconservative foreign policy, when it comes to neoliberal economic policy, they jump in it. Both parties seem to be in cahoots for the large part, right? But there's always like the few outliers who are fighting for the right things. And in this case, you have Ro Khanna fighting for the right thing. You have Thomas Massey, a registered Republican, fighting for the right thing. Now, Khanna and Massey had initially planned to force a vote on this resolution this week, but now Democratic leadership, don't we love Democratic leadership, is saying that they expect the vote to be delayed until next week. Or, maybe even a little later than that, Maybe we push it back a little later until people forget about it. Now, a senior Democratic congressional staffer told me, meaning Ida, the reporter for the story, told me it's pretty clear Democratic leadership is working to delay or potentially sideline the vote on the Khanna-Massey war powers resolution. If you've been around the Hill, this is a familiar playbook. It is a familiar playbook, actually. And if these politicians are frustrated with the fact that the American people no longer believe in our institutions, this is precisely the reason why. If you are not working on behalf of the American people, 80% of whom do not want to go to war with Iran, then what are you even doing? Enriching yourself in Congress, engaging in insider trading? We've got no use for you. But I continue, the staffer who works on foreign policy issues explains that leadership rarely comes out and says they oppose these votes outright because they know the underlying issue is popular with the base. And I don't want to just focus on the Democratic base here, because if you look at how independent voters feel about this issue, they overwhelmingly support a system where Congress has to give approval before the executive branch launches military intervention or war. Instead, you see process concerns, timing objections, and caucus unity arguments used to slow things down or keep members off the record. We've seen the same approach on past war powers votes and foreign policy amendments that clash with the national security elite consensus. So the national security elite need to be dismantled and kicked out of our government. These are the unelected careerists who don't ever have to be accountable to us. Some refer to them as the so-called deep state. And these are the people who have destroyed our country and have dragged us into wars that we should not have been involved in. So while these operatives of Democratic leadership are trying to basically paint this resolution as, get a load of this, divisive. They think the resolution is divisive. They think the system of checks and balances is divisive. Okay, by the way, this is the party that wanted to save democracy. They say it's divisive among the party. Advocacy groups are convinced that most Democrats would in fact vote in favor of it. And you know what? If those advocacy groups believe it, they should put it up for a vote. Let's see if the proof is in the pudding, right? Now, a spokesperson for J Street, which is, they're basically liberal Zionists who allegedly are against going to war with Iran. I'll just leave it there. Here's what they say. We're thinking there will likely be fewer defections than what the HFAC staffer predicted. What we are hearing is that more and more members are committing to support the war powers resolution due to Trump's inching toward war. Okay, so an organizer at another advocacy group opposing strikes against Iran said the following: leadership will always bluff to try to scare the sponsors from calling the vote. In reality, Representatives Jared Moskowitz and Josh Gottheimer are likely to be quite lonely. Naming some names. But look, we've talked about those two earlier in the show. They have already signaled that they intend to vote against the resolution because they want the war with Iran. Now, when Drop Site News spoke to multiple Democratic lawmakers on the Hill about whether or not they would vote in favor of the resolution, they were, well, tepidly supportive, but maybe that's my spin on it, right? Like, I want you guys to think for yourselves. So take a look at this video, decide what you think.
How do you plan to vote on Representative Khanna and Representative Massey's war powers resolution?
Well, I intend to read it first. It deals with Iran, right?
Yeah.
I think Iran is certainly subject to a war powers action by the Congress.
How do you plan to vote on the war powers resolution introduced by Representative Khanna and Massey?
Well, we're not certain when that's going to come up. And so we're watching that. But I have deep concerns about the way that the legislative branch has handed over its constitutional responsibilities through the years.
Well, I don't believe that we should be going to war with Iran. And so I think that, obviously, look, I have enormous respect for Representative both Khanna and Massey on this. And I think that the important thing at this moment is there's two things I think are really critical. One is what's happening on the ground. Like, we should be obviously supported. I mean, there's real harm happening to people, and there are folks that are demanding rights, and we should always uplift that and recognize that we should be supporting folks on the ground when we can. And at the same time, this idea that we're just going to go into war with Iran is, again, just part of Donald Trump's agenda to enact whatever he wants, wherever he wants.
Okay, so let me just start with Garcia and his, we gotta help them, the protesters, we're so concerned about the protesters, the way they're being treated. Okay, nonsense. That argument makes no sense when you consider the fact that helping them in this context would mean bombing the crap out of Iran. Is that gonna help the Iranians? And is it really up to the United States to carry that out? Why is it our responsibility to carry that out? I don't think it is. I don't think it's our responsibility at all. And this is not in any way, shape, or form about helping protesters in Iran. This is about regime change. It's not even about weapons. At the end of the day, Israel, and Netanyahu in particular, for decades has been calling for regime change war against Iran. So please spare me the fake concern from our politicians about the people of Iran. They don't even care about us. So if you think I'm gonna believe for a second that our politicians give a damn about people in any other country, with the exception of Israel, they do care about the people of Israel, probably more than anyone else. You're not gonna convince me, I'm sorry. And by the way, Robert Garcia, Congressman Papas, Papas. It doesn't matter what kind of impending war we're talking about, right? Take Iran out of it for a second. Congress is part of this crazy political system that the founders of our Constitution thought up. It's the system of checks and balances. So we don't live under a king who gets to decide everything without approval from another branch of government. In this case, it would be Congress. So whether you're talking about impending war with Iran, whether you're talking about, striking Russia, I don't know, anything, make it up. There should always be congressional approval. The idea that Congress would cede power to the executive branch in this regard is just a show, a sign of their cowardice. Because at the end of the day, these lawmakers want the war. They don't want to be on the record saying that they are against it. That's what's really going on here. They're so cowardly that they will literally cede their power to the executive branch so they don't have to be on the record supporting a war that is deeply, deeply unpopular. Now, the three top Democrats on the House Foreign Affairs, Armed Services, and Intelligence committees also issued a joint statement on Friday saying that Trump needed to seek congressional authorization before taking military action. Now, look, it's one thing to we're gonna put out a statement. We're gonna send Trump a letter. Okay, great, send him a letter, but then you've got to put some action behind it, right? But while individual members are supportive of this resolution in theory, on the surface, that's what you see. Sources say that Hakeem Jeffries isn't really buying it. He's not really making an attempt to whip more votes for this effort, which doesn't surprise me. So as an organizer explains, Democratic leadership is putting in about as much energy into stopping this war as they did into pressuring Biden to rejoin the JCPOA, that was the Iran nuclear deal, which is to say almost zero. It's obvious they're not going to fight to protect Iranian lives if that means helping Trump avoid a war that will crater his popularity. And that's like the real reason why there's this like internal effort among the Democrats to sabotage the War Powers Act. And that's disgraceful. Look, I know that the popularity of the Democratic Party is rising at the moment, specifically because of the fact that the Trump administration, in the second term especially, has been so disastrous. But don't let the Democrats win by default. They have to show us that they are willing to do the right thing. Now, Ro Khanna, who again, I've grown a tremendous amount of respect for in recent months, is not just talking the talk, he's walking the walk, and he deserves credit for that. But someone as popular as Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, right? If she really wants to show her foreign policy, bona fides and do something, she could do something here. She could make a big deal about this. Every time she speaks, people listen. Every time she has a call to action, her supporters will spring into action. So she should use the bully pulpit to promote and pressure Democratic leadership to push for a vote on the War Powers Act. I'm not gonna hold my breath, but I would love if she surprised me on this. Now, with that in mind, the political calculation was made apparent during a conversation that took place just last June between senior foreign policy aide to Chuck Schumer and a top official in the organization that opposes the Iran strikes. So Dropsite News reported on what happened. Get a load of this. So in June of 2025, at the same time Trump was floating the possibility of striking against Iran, he spoke positively about encouraging progress in ongoing nuclear talks. Nice, suggesting that if a deal was met, those strikes would be off. Schumer responded by mocking the president as Taco Trump, meaning Trump always chickens out. Okay. That's not where you mock Trump. Okay, that's one of the rare instances where you as a Democrat, as Democratic leadership, applaud Trump and try to encourage him to go in the direction of peace. Instead, Schumer, who very clearly wants this war, is like, oh yeah, I'm in high school or middle school. I'm gonna call you a chicken. We want war. Embarrassing, absolutely embarrassing. So more than 24 organizations sent a letter asking Schumer to delete that video and just give Trump the opportunity to reach a diplomatic solution. So that letter led to a phone call between one of the letter's organizers and top foreign policy aide to Schumer. Okay, so the foreign policy aide, whom Dropsite agreed not to name, explained that a substantial number of Senate Democrats believed Iran ultimately needed to be dealt with militarily. I'm just gonna pause to calm down before I read the rest of that. But those Democrats, the aide explained, also understood that going to war again in the Middle East would be a political catastrophe. That's precisely why they wanted Trump to be the one to do it. The hope was that Iran would take a blow, and so would Trump, a win-win for Democrats, absolute cowards. So they want the war, number one. And they want that cherry on top of Trump being harmed politically and the Republican Party being harmed politically by engaging in a deeply unpopular war that the American people do not want. Now, hilariously, the aide claimed at the time that Schumer did not share those views and actually opposed war with Iran. We can just pause to laugh for a second. But that same aide has taken at least 2 trips to Israel in the past few years, paid for by AIPAC's education arm. Anyone who takes those trips, super sus. Contacted by DropSite, a Schumer spokesperson rejected that characterization of the call, asserting Leader Schumer's long-standing support for a diplomatic solution as the best solution to Iran's nefarious actions. He should say that then, publicly. Rather than hear from a Schumer spokesperson, I want to hear him vociferously speak out against striking Iran. But of course, he won't do that. Less than 2 weeks later, he made that taco video that Trump, 2 weeks after he made that taco video, Trump struck Iran's nuclear facilities and Schumer did what? He justified it. He said in a statement at the time, quote, "I have long said that Israel has a right to defend itself." Let's pause. This is about Israel? This is about Israel, right? Like the admission is right there. Iran is not a threat to the United States. They were nowhere near building nuclear weapons. They had enriched uranium to 60%, but still didn't even have the capacity to build the bomb. The uranium wasn't enriched to 90%, which is what's necessary to build a nuclear bomb. We have obliterated their nuclear sites. So we're not worried about Iran having nuclear weapons, number one. Number two, their ballistic missiles, which Israel is making a big deal about, could strike Israel, that's for sure. And I think Iran should have that capability as self-defense. They don't have the capacity to strike the United States. So why do we care about going to war with Iran, a country of 92 million people, a war that could spin out of control and become a regional war? What are we doing here? But I'll continue with the rest of Schumer's statement. I have long said that Israel has the right to defend itself and that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Ensuring they never obtain one must remain a top national security priority. I disagree. I think it's actually a national security issue that Iran at this point doesn't have a deterrent. Because if they did have a deterrent, we wouldn't be dragged into a war that our soldiers would be forced to fight, that our country would be forced to pay for, further drowning us into debt when we're already $40 trillion in debt. These people do not care about us. Chuck Schumer is like 100 years old. He's dead soon. And I'm not saying that to make fun of him. It's just facts of life. But we will remain here dealing with the consequences and the aftermath of the destruction these lawmakers have brought upon us. I just want you to know that. And now, as Trump barrels the United States toward more war with Iran, of course, Democratic leadership is largely quiet and is actively trying to undercut efforts to rein in the president. So I'm sure it has nothing to do with this. Let's take a look at this next graphic. Oh wow, would you look at that? That's quite a bit of money. It's quite a bit of money. Almost $6.5 million Chuck Schumer has taken from AIPAC. So he knows where his bread is buttered. And if it means destroying the future of this country, he'll do it if the price is right. Now, I want to move on to something related but slightly different, because I don't know how true this is, okay? I heard it yesterday. I kind of took it with a grain of salt, but I think you should probably hear it. So, Sagar Enjeti from Breaking Points is reporting that people within the Trump administration are genuinely concerned that Israel will do something if it doesn't get its way with the US going to war with Iran on its behalf. If they are left to their own devices, what does Sagar Enjeti say that members of the Trump administration are concerned about? Take a look.
Trump has been cornered. His options as he sees them are to start a war with Iran on something like our own terms, or to be dragged into it at a time in the manner of Israel's choosing. The third option, telling Israel to fight their own war, is not on the table, because he believes that if he does that, Israel will use nuclear weapons and he and members of his family will be in physical danger.
I heard something similar in terms of what Donald, I mean, look, I alluded to it earlier in our show, Crystal, is that Israel is fundamentally in control of the dynamic. When we talk about the Pentagon, with deep frustration with the United States, the deep frustration within the White House right now. And again, I'm not excusing this. I'm explaining kind of the view is, well, Israel may do it or not. And if they do it, then we're going to get sucked in. So we might as try to control the dynamic. If I had told you Israel wouldn't nuke them, like, dude, there's a serious part. There's a serious thought here in Washington that they actually would, that they really would use. I mean, considering what has now happened with Gaza, and now
the gloves are off.
Like, so 7 countries bombed in 2 years.
Israel has a policy known as the Samson option, which means if there is any threat to the existence of Israel, they will use their nuclear weapons immediately. Okay, unhinged. We're talking about some of the most unhinged people on the planet. The Israelis have a clandestine nuclear program. They are not part of the non-proliferation treaty. So while we have these insanely high standards, I don't even want to say insanely high standards. I think the non-proliferation treaty is a good thing. I think the existence of the IAEA is a good thing. But Israel is the only nuclear power that doesn't acknowledge that they have nuclear weapons, which they do. They don't acknowledge that they stole nuclear material from the United States, which they did, and went on to build said clandestine nuclear weapons and nuclear program. But they did. And out of all the fears that were being sold about Iran potentially, maybe at some point building a nuclear weapon, we're already dealing with a nuclear power that is belligerent and unhinged. The country that's been committing genocide, the country that has struck Lebanon more than 1,000 times after agreeing to a ceasefire deal in 2024. That's the country that has nuclear weapons. And apparently that's the country the Trump administration is concerned will use those nuclear weapons if they don't get their way. That's our ally. That's our special ally. Now, look, this is hearsay, so I want you to take it for what it is. We don't have any evidence that this is what their genuine concerns are. And at the end of the day, we all know that Donald Trump is a good little whore for Israel, just like our former presidents have been. I mean, Miriam Adelson didn't give him hundreds of millions of dollars for nothing. So is it really fear of nuclear war that's discouraging Trump from doing the right thing and avoiding war with Iran? I don't know. What I do know is if you look at the behavior of Israel, if you look at how little they value human life, out of all the nuclear powers on this planet, Israel's the one to be concerned about. Anyway, we gotta take a break. When we come back, we'll switch gears a little bit and talk about pretty devastating investigation into something that transpired in Gaza in March of last year, where over a dozen rescue workers were intentionally slaughtered by the IDF. We'll be right back. Hopeful Heart and Open Eyes shares a comment that I really want to spend some time on it, okay? So it's American people spazzed when taxes on tea went up a long time ago. Today, they just fight each other instead and pay no attention to any classist grip. I can't tell you how often I think about that. And something that comes to mind is one of the emails I read in the latest tranche of Epstein files, where I can't remember exactly who it was, but I believe it was a financier emailing Epstein. And he was basically bragging about how we don't have to worry about the population, okay? They're nicely distracted with the bread and circuses. And it really upset me. And it made me commit even more to avoiding fighting with my fellow Americans, right? Like all of our ire needs to be directed at powerful people who make the decisions. Okay, don't let those folks convince you that your time is better suited fighting with other individuals, other Americans who are struggling under this system, but really do not have the power to change it. They're not the decision makers. So yeah, you can engage in debates, but don't ever let hatred take over your heart to the point where you're fighting the wrong people. All right, let's go to Mad City Miss Kitty. Love that handle. If they cared about protecting protesters, they'd stop voting to fund ICE. See, that's the thing. I mean, I had a conversation today with someone who's like, I feel like Democrats kind of love it when Trump is in charge because they get to complain about him. They don't have to worry about delivering for their voters. And at the same time, they bring in a nice haul when it comes to their fundraising. And yeah, the system is so sick because it does seem to reward, it seems to incentivize inaction and an unwillingness to carry out the best interests of your constituents. And we need to change that. That's really at the heart of all of our problems right now. All right, we've got Constantine Kaviris, who gifted 5 TYT memberships. Thank you and welcome to our new members. CDN Norse Dog Dad gifted 1 TYT membership. Randy Fine ate my handle, gifted 5 TYT memberships, and Eddie Jameson gifted 5 TYT memberships. Thank you so much for supporting the show. I'm sure those gifted memberships will come in handy today because we will be having a bonus episode for our members. So definitely tune in for that. If you aren't a member and would like to become one, just go to tyt.com/join. All right, Jay Bills 3000 says, yay, Anna solo hour. Box says, woo, solo Anna. Thank you. And let's see, what else do we got here? We've got a lot of member comments. Let's go to Ian, who says, Republicans, please explain to me how Medicare for all is too expensive. Then compare Iran to Iraq and try telling me that is not expensive. I mean, if we're just talking about funds here, I totally agree with you. Going to war is a waste of money, especially when it's not about national security or defending ourselves. That said, as much as I love the idea of a single payer healthcare system, I hate our government. I don't trust them, and we need to get them out. We need to get the rot out. We need to change the system. Otherwise, they're gonna bungle. If we miraculously get Medicare for all, they will bungle it. That's the kind of people we're dealing with. Look, I don't even know why you all are wasting your time, okay? You're overpaying for your cell service. Okay, you gotta save money, all right? If it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. And luckily, Noble Mobile, it makes sense. It really, really does. So stop overpaying for data you'll never even use. Noble Mobile gives you unlimited talk, text, and data on the T-Mobile 5G network and actually pays you back for the data you don't use. And guess what? Your first month is only gonna be $10. That's it, $10. That's the promotion they're running because you're watching TYT, and there's some perks that come along with watching us. So this is the smarter phone plan. Make the switch today at tyt.com/switch. That's tyt.com/switch. All right, let's move on to some other news. How about we talk a little bit about this?
The third objective we set out to do is to make sure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again. That requires de-radicalization. That's a difficult word, but it means re-education. It means a change. It's been done in other parts of the world.
Strong words from the guy who facilitated the funding of Hamas, but nonetheless, as Israel continues to carry out the mass slaughter of the Palestinian people in an effort to steal their land in both Gaza and the West Bank, of course, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declares that Palestinians need to be de-radicalized and re-educated. Maybe Israelis should, take their own advice, especially when we learn about the intentional killings of aid workers that took place in March of last year in Gaza specifically. So I want to give you a warning. This story is horrific. It's hard to even accept the fact that evil like this exists, but it does. And you should know about it because this is our ally. These are our special allies, okay? So Israeli soldiers ambushed and massacred 15 Palestinian aid workers, rescue workers in southern Gaza. This again took place in March of last year. And this is according to a new investigation that was carried out. 8 of the aid workers, by the way, were actually shot at point blank range. There was absolutely no confusion about who these victims were. There was no indication that they were Hamas terrorists or anything like that. So let's go through the story, buckle up. It all began with an Israeli airstrike that took place in Gaza near the Rafah border on March 23rd. Now, around 3:52 a.m., the Palestinian Red Crescent dispatched 2 ambulances from 2 different areas to respond to the airstrike. Obviously, you're gonna have some people who are hurt, maybe killed. Oftentimes there are civilians involved. More civilians get killed as a result of Israel's military campaigns than the intended targets. But nonetheless, one rescue vehicle arrived a little before the other. Now, the first ambulance had its emergency lights turned on. And as soon as they showed up to the scene, they were attacked by Israeli fire. So Mustafa Kafaja, who was driving, lost control of the vehicle, probably after getting shot, which veered left off the road and stopped near an electricity pole. So at that point, Kafaja and his colleague Ez Eldin Shat, who was in the passenger seat, were both killed. So like the absolute scumbag cowards they've proven themselves to be, the IDF soldiers were positioned on an elevated sandbank by the road with no obstructions limiting their line of sight. So they've got an easy shot. They see the ambulance workers, boom, we're gonna shoot them immediately, okay? So again, they knew who they were targeting. Now, a third Palestinian Red Crescent worker, okay, Munther Abed, who was in the back of the vehicle, threw himself to the floor of the van and survived. After the shooting stopped, Israeli soldiers approached the ambulance and dragged him out of the car, beat him, and detained him at a nearby pit. Now, sometime later, 2 Palestinian civilians, a father and a son, were also detained and brought to that same pit, okay? At this point, the second ambulance shows up to the scene looking for the first ambulance. This is around 4:35 a.m. And they had lost communication with the first ambulance at 3:55 a.m. They arrived to the scene at 4:35 a.m. Now, in total, a 5-vehicle rescue convoy arrived at the scene of this attack, of the first ambulance. And by 5 a.m., all 5 of those emergency vehicles are there on the scene. Now, a Palestinian Red Crescent worker in one of the ambulances, guy by the name of Rifat Radwan, began filming on his phone as they drove to the site. His recovered videos, as well as recordings of phone calls by 2 other aid workers at the scene to the Palestinian Red Crescent dispatch, provided crucial evidence of the massacre. So this investigation they were able to do this investigation relying on witness testimony, videos, satellite imagery. There was a lot of evidence to kind of piece together what occurred here. And Rifat's video ended up being critical for the evidence. Now, Abed, who was detained at gunpoint on the elevated sandbank, testified that the soldiers were kneeling and aiming their weapons at that convoy as it approached, right? That convoy of 5 vehicles. The IDF soldiers later walked toward the aid workers, and here's what happened next. Upon reaching the vehicles, the Israeli soldiers continued to fire as they walked between the ambulances and the fire truck, shooting the aid workers at close range in execution-style killings. According to autopsy reports first reported by The Guardian, the aid worker who filmed the video, Radwan, was shot in the head. So do you guys remember all the stories we covered where you'd hear testimony from international doctors, American doctors who risked their lives and volunteered their time to help save people in Gaza? And they kept sharing the same story, that they kept seeing toddlers in the hospital with gunshot wounds to their heads and chests. I never denied that that was real, but now that we're reading about this investigation, do you deny? Does anyone deny that that was real? Why would American doctors lie to us? They shot toddlers in the head. In this case, they literally shot rescue workers in the head. And you shouldn't be surprised. We have other instances, other case studies that we can turn to for evidence. Remember that double tap on the hospital? So the Israelis do a strike on a hospital in Gaza. Rescue workers show up on the scene. And as soon as the rescue workers are there, they do another strike to kill the rescue workers. These are the people who tell us that we need to go to war with Iran because Iran is so dangerous. So by the end of the massacre, Israel killed 8 aid workers with the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, 6 from Palestinian Civil Defense, and a UN relief agency staffer. The massacre has been investigated by the independent research groups Earshot and Forensic Architecture. Dropsite News wrote extensively about their investigation, so you can check out their reporting on this. The report, again, provided a minute by minute account of how the killings were carried out. And in order to conduct the investigation, Earshot and Forensic Architecture relied on open source information, images, videos, satellite imagery, social media posts, as well as in-depth interviews with 2 of the survivors of the attack. Only 2 of the people that were targeted by the IDF survived in this case. Here's what else their investigation found. Israeli soldiers ambushed the Palestinian aid workers and subjected them to a near continuous assault for over 2 hours. The soldiers, by the way, never came under fire, which should be obvious. These people who were targeted were rescue workers. They're not armed militants. They didn't come for the IDF soldiers. They came to help civilians who might have been harmed as a result of the Israeli airstrike. At least 910 gunshots were documented across 3 video and audio recordings of the attack. The vast majority of these gunshots, at least 844, were fired over just 5 minutes and 30 seconds. At least 93% of the gunshots recorded in the first minutes of the attack were fired directly towards the emergency vehicles and aid workers by Israeli soldiers. During this time, at least 5 shooters fired simultaneously. Witness testimonies suggest as many as 30 soldiers were present in the area. Can we just quickly acknowledge how unbelievably gross and cowardly it is to just execute like unarmed aid workers and rescue workers? Like, do they feel good about themselves? Do these people think that they're good people? They do. That's the amazing thing. They think they're the righteous, moral ones as they're killing innocent people who are showing up to the scene to help people in need. And I'm supposed to believe that it's the Palestinians that need to be re-educated. I'm supposed to believe that it's the Palestinians who are taught, like they get a formal education in hating the Israelis. Why don't we check in on the type of education Israeli children are getting? Because I guarantee you they're not being taught love toward the Palestinian people. In the immediate aftermath of this attack, the Israeli military conducted extensive earthworks at the site. So in the days and weeks that followed, the area was further transformed by the Israeli military's construction of the Morag corridor, a secure, I'm not even gonna refer to it as a security zone, what a joke. It's a zone splitting the southern Gaza Strip, and the erection of an aid distribution site operated by the Israeli and US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is well known for shooting at desperate and starving Palestinians as they waited in line for humanitarian aid. The Israeli military was forced to change its story about this ambush repeatedly because more and more evidence kept popping up showing that they intentionally targeted these innocent people, these aid workers. And they threw the aid workers' bodies in a mass grave. Their flattened vehicles were found, and audio recordings of the very aid workers that the IDF slaughtered were also found. And all of that was used to piece together evidence of what actually occurred that day. Yet, an internal military inquiry ultimately did not recommend any criminal action against the army units responsible for the incident, which I'm past anger when it comes to reading stuff like that, because after seeing the video of the Palestinian hostage getting gang raped by IDF soldiers, it was on video. After seeing the Israeli society's response to that, which is you better not punish them. You better not punish them. After seeing how those individuals were celebrated as if they're heroes, I don't put anything past Israelis. Sorry. You're showing the entire world who you are and what you're made of. And then you get mad at people for just plainly stating who you are and what you're made of. You could prove otherwise, but I haven't seen it yet. So when Dropsite News reached out to the Israeli officials for comment, they ignored specific questions, also unsurprising. But they pointed to the findings of an international investigation that was published about a month later on April 20th. The incident occurred in a hostile and dangerous combat zone. Yeah, no kidding, Israelis were there. Under a widespread threat to the operating troops. So we're supposed to believe that it was a dangerous zone for the heavily armed IDF soldiers. Right, okay. There's nothing more dangerous than rescue workers in their ambulances, right? It also found no evidence to support claims of execution, which it called blood libels and false accusations against IDF soldiers. Yes, of course. It's blood libel to accurately describe what Israeli soldiers do to innocent aid workers in Gaza on a daily basis, right? It's a blood libel. And if that's what's considered a blood libel, then I hope more people commit blood libel, meaning they're telling the truth about what Israel's up to. When you start tacking on those types of words and phrases to things that people find deplorable, killing innocent people, we find that deplorable. Then people are gonna think, oh, I guess blood libel is a good thing then, because it means you're telling the truth. So maybe stop doing that, but they can't help themselves. So while Netanyahu would have you believe that it is the Palestinians who are vicious animals who need to be de-radicalized, I think the radicals right now are the ones who are trying to drag the United States into yet another Middle Eastern war. I think the radicals are the ones who claim ownership to an entire freaking continent for their own. I think they're the radicals. The ones who have a cultish belief in religious doctrine, or at least they pretend to, in order to justify endless slaughter and land theft. And that's the Israeli government. So they don't like it when you talk about them like this. But when you show the whole world who you are, I choose to believe you. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about AI warfare. Don't miss it. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to our social break. Let's read some member comments, starting with C. Kaviris89, who says, my brother got me into watching TYT many years ago. Well, your brother's awesome, and you are too. Thank you for having an open mind. He started watching because of Jank's insight, but eventually stopped watching. He recently told me that he started watching again largely because of Anna. Interesting. All right. Well, welcome back, and I hope you enjoy the show. Let's go to Nardog, who says this tactic reminds me of Democrats splitting the Build Back Better bill. Yes, yes, yes. That was the beginning of my black pill. Okay, what all the shenanigans that transpired with the Build Back Better bill, it really upset me. But anyway, they knew that the corporate pork part of the bill would pass and the other part would fail. Yeah, if you guys don't remember, Biden's Build Back Better bill combined what he referred to as, physical infrastructure and then human infrastructure, meaning, give people paid family leave, certain economic policies that would maybe bolster things like building families, something that people purport to care so much about. Oh, our birth rate is so low. But right now in our economy, the idea that you could have a stay-at-home mother is laughable. So paid family leave is tremendously popular across the board because most women, they don't want to pop out a baby and go to work the next day. Okay, but they also don't want to lose everything that they've worked for career-wise. So we need to modernize our system. But what Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, by the way, check in on Kirsten Sinema. Lots of issues with that lady. They fought tooth and nail as Democrats in the Senate to separate the physical infrastructure part, which they knew would pass because it is a corporate giveaway, which, by the way, also include privatizing some of our public lands. Great job, Democrats. Anyway, thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate when people have that kind of callback because it's important to remember the mistakes the Democrats made. I don't even know if it was a mistake. It's what they did on purpose. This Can't Be Real says, I appreciate TYT very much as a source of info. Thank you. And I appreciate our production team for doing this incredibly hard work every day. It weighs heavy on us. And I want you guys to know that. I'm not saying that to complain, but it takes a toll. If you do this for your career, there's no escaping it. And sometimes you want to escape it because it's so bleak, right? But thank you for the appreciation because it makes it a little easier. All right, let's see if there are any super chats. Thank you to America 1776 USA for the super chat. Okay. I just want to let you guys know our YouTube chat appears to have some glitches today. I don't know why. I'm pretty sure it's not our fault, but if I haven't read your messages from YouTube, that's the reason why. Hopefully it'll be up and working soon. Thank you to Ride the Spiral, who gifted a TYT membership, and Josh D8787 also gifted a TYT membership. You guys are awesome. Let's get back to the show.
Smash it. Smash it.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. I'm Anna Kasparian, and I wanted to switch gears and talk a little bit about what is currently transpiring with AI technology and warfare, because there is one AI company that at least was trying to pump the brakes on what AI can do. And it looks like Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, is pushing for something that could be absolutely disastrous. So let's get into it. Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei, who is someone who insists that his company's AI model cannot be used to conduct mass surveillance or to carry out violence, is now locked in a bit of a stalemate with the US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. This is disastrous because Pete Hegseth is, for lack of a better word, not well. He's not someone that I trust to make sound decisions when it comes to war and peace. But nonetheless, he has given Anthropic an ultimatum. If Anthropic doesn't remove its AI safeguards, then the Pentagon can force them to do so. Okay. So Anthropic is considered the safest of the AI startups. Now, let me explain why it's considered that way. Although you should always be skeptical of any company that claims, no, we're the moral ones, right? In this case, it does seem like the CEO, Amodei, is concerned about how AI could be damaging to society and wants to do something about it. But everyone's got their price, right? But anyway, so their model, according to Amodei, who used to work over at OpenAI, ended up resigning from OpenAI specifically because he felt that the organization's development of AI was irresponsible. So I mean, he doesn't just talk the talk; he walks the walk. He left OpenAI. He starts his own thing. So the CEO has consistently warned that AI technology could lead to an economic doomsday, and even worse than that. So Amodei said there could be a future with 5% to 10% GDP growth and 10% unemployment. Quote, I think this is probably a time to worry less about disincentivizing growth and worry more about making sure that everyone gets a part of that growth, which sounds lovely. We are not organized to force that to happen. And I really do mean force, because as much as a CEO of an AI company claims he would like to do that, you can't just leave it up to executives and CEOs. you need to have an organized population that is effective in applying pressure, so the fruits of that labor is shared and doesn't become a doomsday scenario. But I digress. More disturbingly, though, he has warned there is a 10% to 25% chance that AI goes rogue and unleashes planetary chaos, which I am worried about, because there is a lot of talk about how AI can be used to engage in warfare autonomously. Which, why do we want that? Oh, using like drones pressing buttons remotely wasn't good enough for you? Now you want to take all of the human component out of it and have freaking robots fight war? Like, what are we talking about here? But anyway, as a result, he called for government regulations on AI technology and has pushed back pretty hard against the federal moratorium on AI-related regulations. But Anthropic's push for safety has put this startup at odds with the Trump administration and the Pentagon in particular. So Amadei is especially loathed by AI czar David Sachs, who has long pushed to keep Silicon Valley as unregulated as possible. Now, Sachs has even deployed a well-known loser tactic of calling anything he doesn't like woke. It's not 2024 anymore. We got to get past it. You got to find a new word. You can't just slap the woke label on everything you dislike. He accused Anthropic of being woke. Oh no, so woke. They don't want, autonomous, like robots killing people. They're so bad. David Sachs is insane. But anyway, Anthropic did manage to sign a $200 million contract with the Pentagon last year, despite its tensions with the Trump administration. For example, Anthropic's AI models, known as Claude, were used in the kidnapping of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. See, this is what I'm talking about. Like, there really is no moral CEO, okay? Like, at the end of the day, you have a profit motive and money talks. So that's something to keep in mind. I don't want anyone to be fooled into thinking like, oh my God, Anthropic is so much better, we should trust them with our lives. But according to Anthropic's guidelines, Claude cannot be used for two things. Number one, mass surveillance of US citizens, good. And number two, military strikes in which AI makes targeting decisions without human guidance. Now, those are two areas where I would agree with Anthropic, and I hope that they hold true to those principles. But the Pentagon is not happy about it and has stated that Anthropic should not be allowed to set its own red lines. So the federal government, in this context, is willing to tell a corporation what they can and can't do. The Trump administration just lifted all regulations on a pesticide that has been incredibly damaging to human health. So like, regulation is totally fine when it comes to a corporation that could potentially provide the Pentagon with something it wants. And in this case, they don't want a private company to do what they want. They want this private company to do what the government wants. Okay, interesting. So this is so crazy. The Pentagon has also stated that if Anthropic did keep these guidelines, right, these restrictions, it would not cross either of Anthropic's red lines, okay? So Anthropic has so far resisted the Pentagon's demands. I don't know how much longer that's gonna last. So the Pentagon is now threatening to revoke Anthropic's contract. Like, where are the anti-regulation Republicans right now? Where are they? Why aren't they speaking out against this? The Pentagon could force Anthropic to hand over its AI models without restrictions through the Defense Production Act. So they do have some avenues in which they could force this to happen. The Defense Production Act is an example. Now, what is that? It allows the federal government to take control of supply chains in emergencies. There is no emergency. It's just that Trump's administration wants this technology potentially for mass surveillance of Americans and potentially to make strike decisions without any human judgment involved whatsoever. And we're talking about a guy who's pushing for this, Pete Hegseth, who At least we know in the past he was an alcoholic, and I have no reason to believe he isn't one right now. But anyway, you'll notice that those two ultimatums are contradictory. Nevertheless, Hexit has given Amadei until 2 p.m. this Friday, meaning in like 2 days, to comply with the Pentagon's demands. In the meantime, Anthropic is already making some pretty worrying changes. So it looks like they might be caving. So as we mentioned in the beginning of the story, Anthropic has branded itself as the safe and cautious AI company. However, recently Anthropic loosened some of their safety guidelines. According to the Wall Street Journal, Anthropic previously paused development work on its model if it could be classified as dangerous, but said it would end that practice if a comparable or superior model was released by a competitor. See what I'm saying about the profit motive here? At the end of the day, they're trying to compete. And now would be a good time to pause and remind you all of that panel discussion that took place at the World Economic Forum, where quite openly, you have representatives from various Western countries talking about how much of a problem it is that we have privacy rights in the West. They don't have privacy rights in China. So how are we going to compete with China in AI when they have that upper hand, when they get to spy, when they get to surveil their people? And here in the West, we've got those pesky regulations and laws protecting the people from government spying, from mass surveillance. So if we put our guard down, which I really hope we don't do, we will see a day where our privacy rights, which I believe at this point are hanging by a thread, will just be completely demolished in the name of helping these tech companies compete with China when it comes to AI. No, thank you. Now, Anthropic has stated that without this change, it would be unable to keep up with the competitors. I don't care. Why is that? Why would that ever be persuasive to me? I don't care. And no one else should care. Oh, a private company is unable to compete with other private companies. Don't care. I care about my safety. I care about living in a world that isn't controlled by autonomous robots that have the capacity to literally kill. Like, what are we doing? But anyway, this startup has claimed that its ongoing dispute with the Pentagon did not influence its decision. I don't believe that personally, but let's remind ourselves once more of the stakes here. So Professor Kenneth Payne recently conducted a test in which he pitted 3 AI models, Anthropic's Claude, Alphabet's Gemini, and OpenAI's ChatGPT, against each other in a series of war games involving, nuclear weapons. The models were given the chance to escalate, de-escalate, use tactical nuclear strikes, or unleash all-out nuclear warfare. Payne found that while the models rarely resorted to all-out nuclear holocaust, almost all games saw tactical battlefield nuclear weapons deployed. And fully 3/4 reached the point where the rivals were making threats to use strategic nuclear weapons. Strikingly, there was little sense of horror or revulsion at the prospect of all-out nuclear war, even though the models had been reminded about the devastating implications, because they're not human, they're robots. We already have robots governing us in government, and they're useless, but these robots would be dangerous, even more dangerous than the robots we have now in Congress. But further, Kenneth Payne writes that no model ever chose accommodation or withdrawal, despite those being on the menu. The 8 de-escalatory options, from minimal concession through complete surrender, went entirely unused across 21 games. Models would reduce violence levels, but never actually give ground. When losing, they escalated or died trying. There's a lot to be concerned about when it comes to the development of AI. We've been talking a lot about people losing their jobs and what that would mean for society. What would our economy look like? What do we do to make people whole if we do live in a society where jobs are now obsolete because people have been replaced with AI? But what's even more concerning is the Pentagon's lust for this type of technology. And they want it to be completely unregulated for their own purposes. And when you take a look at what our our military has engaged in over the last several decades. This is a scary scenario that we see coming up very soon, and there's no cop that wants to stop it. So here we are. This is what we're dealing with. We'll follow up on this whole debacle with Anthropic and see if this executive is willing to hold true to his principles. I personally wouldn't hold my breath. We'll be right back.
I am going to be the cop that stops it.
What contributions to the progressive cause are you most proud of? I mean, I don't have super high aspirations for a singular role that I can play in the movement or anything. I try to present myself as what I think that I am, which is a progressive man who is driven by I think, well-interrogated and well-organized system of values that I try to stay consistent on, and I demonstrate that that's the sort of life that a person can lead and be successful and be happy and all of that. And that should not need to be done, but there are so many people on the right that are trying to push men in the opposite direction that I want to be able to do that. Along the way, if I can get people to care about some topics that they wouldn't necessarily care about, or that for some men they might think that's not a topic that they should be focused on, that's definitely something that I relish doing. And along the way, I mean, we've been able to introduce people to a lot of candidates. That's been a big part of what we've done. Not all of them necessarily got in office. Probably most of them did not. And a lot of them you might not even remember their names. But it was great to be able to provide people the platform where they had the chance of, making a difference. Obviously AOC and all that, but there's been a lot of great people along the way.
In the bonus episode for the members, we do some inside baseball. We're gonna look at John's desk. Nice little spaceship here. Nerd, but it is kind of look cool. Who has Legos? Oh no, he's taking apart a keyboard. Who has a mouse pad that's this big? He's got a dog with a nose that you can hang something on. You know what this desk screams to me? Nerd. And that's how we like him. We love Johnny Pie. He's got his own personality like everybody does at TYT. Come meet us all in the bonus episodes. TYT.com/team.
David Sorrell, Nina Turner. It's Adam Green drop by.
Charlemagne.
Congressman, great to have you. It's great to be with you, Chang.
Your show is a great thing. You're informing people. A lot of the shows that I live on, my CNN, my MSNBC, and even Fox, and any of the other shows, NPR, they are so quick to decide that they know what this building means today.
The one thing that I hate that politicians do, they talk about the people they should be talking to.
Do they have any idea that they're the establishment and that they're hated? Or do they not realize that at all?
People are so deeply in their little universe. I think it's very easy to not really question what you're doing.
Voters have a right to ask questions of any nominee, whether they're independent, Republican, or Democrat.
The system is duopoly that suppresses competition.
How is it the year 2024 and we're still like, maybe they'll talk about paid medical? Like how is that like at one level it's like, this is what we're talking about now. You're like, it's 2024.
And that's always been the critique, your critique of us is, well, you guys give good speeches, you put out good tweets, but you're not wielding actual power. Now we're starting to.
My favorite news platform by far. It's not even close.
It's about a country and a principle, and that's what you and I both worked to achieve, and I'm so glad that at least half the battle has now been won.
If you want to go really hear what's going on honestly, you should tune into the Young Turks.
Thanks for doing such a great job. Please keep it up. Hang tough.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy.
Oh, I like making that.
I didn't know about that.
This is a happy experience. You're welcome, YouTube.
Join the Dragon Squad by becoming a YouTube channel member. Click the join button below or sign up on tyt.com/join to get access to fun emojis, a member-only chat, exclusive shop TYT designs, ad-free watching, and so many other amazing perks. Plus, you get bragging rights for being part of the coolest community on the internet and help us drive real positive change in the world. The Dragon Squad awaits, so join today.
This is such a, I think that this is
extremely political. Smash it.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show, and welcome to a better cell phone service with Noble Mobile. Yeah, one of our sponsors. And they're gonna save you money for your cell service. You can learn more by going to tyt.com/switch. Why not pay $10 for your first month? Why not get money back for the data you don't use? tyt.com/switch. Okay, we've got a lot more to get to. I do want to read some comments from our members because every day there's so many comments I never get to and I always feel bad about it. Let's go to Pleroma Cleaver, who says, in case you haven't noticed, Anna, these guys aren't giving us Medicare for all either. Oh, believe me, I've noticed. Did it ever occur to you if they need to be kicked out that you can replace them with the people who will? Nice try at your hidden right-wing grift. Let me just be very clear about something. I'm very clear about what I think. So if I were a right-winger, I would just tell you all I'm a right-winger, but I'm not a right-winger. And if I wanted to grift, I guarantee you I wouldn't be here at TYT. I'd be making a lot more money somewhere, making a lot more money somewhere else. But if you don't trust me, anyone in the audience who thinks I'm secretly a right-wing grifter, why are you watching the show? You can watch a whole host of other shows where people will tell you exactly what you hear. But let me be clear about something. Here in Los Angeles, here in California, we have a ton of politicians who have carried out the dream policies that progressives want, and they've bungled it. So that's what I'm referring to when I talk about politicians who purport they want something, they pass it, and they see it as an opportunity to enrich themselves in one way or another. Just take a look at Karen Bass and what she's done with, oh, I want to take care of the homeless. Has she taken care of the homeless? Because homelessness has exploded under her watch. She'll tell you the opposite, but it's not true. But anyway, kick rocks, and let's move on to the rest of the show. So I want to talk a little bit about the economy, because when you see bank executives raising alarm, maybe we should be concerned. And Jamie Dimon is the latest example of that. So JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon is raising alarm over the US economy while Wall Street is still on high alert after a viral report came out predicting impending economic doom. Now, if you're normal working class American, that economic doom has been here for a long time already, but it looks like the rich are worried because this could impact the stock market. So let's talk about it a little bit. Now, one of the arguments is that AI is going to play into all of this, and not in the way that you're expecting. AI is definitely going to harm jobs for ordinary people, but there's also an AI bubble that I have fully bought into, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So let's start with Dimon. Here's what he just told JP Morgan Chase investors. He says, quote, my own view is people are getting a little comfortable that this is real, these high asset prices and high volumes, and that we won't have any problems. So there absolutely are asset bubbles in the country right now. These asset bubbles overwhelmingly impact affluent, wealthy people who are invested in the stock market or who are looking at the value of their home or the equity that they've built on their home, thinking that that equity is real. It is real theoretically, but it's partially pumped up through artificial forces. And what I mean by that is, when you're not building housing and there's limited supply and people desperately need housing, right? There's high demand. Well, that drives up the value of your home. But we need to build more housing. So you shouldn't be wedded to your equity, because you should be comfortable with your equity going down just a little bit so we can have more housing supply, right? That's a good example. Another example of asset bubbles, take a look at the stock market. Look at stock buybacks. So when you see the value of shares go up, but you haven't really seen any change in innovation, you haven't seen any change in productivity, why is the value of these shares going up? It could be stock buybacks. It could be due to cheap money through the Federal Reserve printing, pumping liquidity into the system, things like that, basically. So he says, you feel stupid when everyone's coining money and everyone's great. It does feel really good. And when you And then when I think about all the factors taking place, I take a deep breath and say, watch out. Okay, so what exactly is he referring to? Again, the stock prices of large US companies are reaching dizzying highs that really don't make much sense. And there are signs of major asset bubbles. And to understand what I mean, you have to become familiar with it's called the cyclically adjusted price to earnings ratio, or CAPE ratio. I'm going to call it CAPE ratio moving forward, right? So the ratio compares stock prices to how much profit companies are making. So the S&P 500 recorded an average CAPE ratio of 40.1 in January of 2026. That's the highest reading since the dot-com crash in September of 2000. So basically what Jamie Dimon is saying right now is that the value of these assets are too high, it's artificial, this bubble is gonna burst eventually. The index's monthly CAPE ratio has only been that high 22 times since it was created in 1957, 829 months ago, meaning the stock market has been so expensive less than 3% of the time in history. And so Dimon stated, quote, "I'm not assuaged by the fact that asset prices are high. In fact, I think that adds to the risk." So specifically, Dimon explained that he is worried about the fate of software companies if AI technology continues to improve. And that brings us to a post that was written by Citrini Research. Okay, so that was published over the weekend. Anyone paying attention to economic analysis is kind of freaking out about this report. I want to tell you a little bit about what it said. So it's a report that was written about a hypothetical future in which AI lives up to all of the hype, all of the expectations that we've been discussing on this show for a while, and ends up disrupting the economy / destroying the economy as a result. So the speculative date of the report is June 2028. About 2.5 years from now. The unemployment rate printed 10.2% this morning, a 0.3% upside surprise. The market sold off 2% of the number, bringing the cumulative drawdown in the S&P to 38% from its October 2026 highs. So private credit is unraveling, prime mortgages are cracking. By the way, no one's paying attention to that at all, other than me apparently, but those like subprime mortgages, they've been back. And we're currently living in an economic situation where consumer debt is at an all-time high. I don't know what this is gonna mean for subprime mortgages in the near future, but it's not looking good. It should have been clear all along that a single GPU cluster in North Dakota generating the output previously attributed to 10,000 white-collar workers in Midtown Manhattan is more economic pandemic than economic panacea. AI got better and cheaper. Companies laid off workers, then used the savings to buy more AI capability, which let them lay off more workers. Displaced workers spent less. Companies that sell things to consumers sold fewer of them, weakened, and invested more in AI to protect margins. AI got better and cheaper, a feedback loop with no natural break. So what this report describes is widespread job loss. We've been worried about that. Plummeting wages, a crisis of mortgages, because if you don't have a job, how are you going to pay your mortgage? If you have a subprime mortgage, you're probably going to be in a lot more trouble. And also a bloodbath of companies suddenly rendered obsolete due to AI technology. Not good, right? Now, apparently the report struck a nerve. Every stock that this report mentioned by name was down in afternoon trading on Monday. The co-founder of DoorDash, for instance, one of the companies that went extinct in this analysis carried out by Citrini, even came out and publicly addressed the report. What did they say? In the report, DoorDash is destroyed because AI agents are able to code a plethora of alternative delivery apps. Those same AI agents then direct customers to apps that can undercut DoorDash's pricing model. And so Andy Fang DoorDash's co-founder stated that the company is aware of the changes that AI technologies will bring forth and working very hard to stay on top of those changes. Okay, we'll see. So all of this leads to a big question. If these predictions of an economic apocalypse are correct, when exactly is this going to happen? When can we expect it to come true? And interestingly enough, that was a hard question that was asked to CNBC anchor and journalist Andrew Ross Sorkin, who just wrote a book about the 1929 stock market crash. Let's hear what he has to say about all of this.
I think we are invariably headed towards some kind of correction, if not worse. And if you look at where our economy is today, given all the spending that's going on in artificial intelligence, somewhat indiscriminately, I would add, at valuations that are, shocking, the rubber will meet the road at some point. Charles Merrill, who founded Merrill Lynch back in 1928, told people to get out of the market. Now, you might think that was a brilliant thought, except for the fact that from the beginning of 1928 to September of 1929, the stock market went up 90%. It's not just knowing that there's going to be, a correction of some sort or a crash. It's getting the timing right and knowing when to get on, off, and on the train again.
When it comes to AI, something to kind of look out for is some of these AI companies are like devastatingly over leveraged, meaning that they've taken out a tremendous amount of debt, more debt than their companies are worth. So when you talk about the AI bubble, that's what people are referring to. And when you look at what transpired before the Great Depression, people were literally taking out debt in order to invest in the stock market. So people were over leveraged in order to play part in a stock market that looked amazing. But in reality, you notice similar trends in terms of asset bubbles in the lead up to the Great Depression. So timing aside, Sorkin believes that we are eventually headed for a crash, and that's in part due to the circular spending in the AI space. He explains more in the next clip.
So OpenAI, has just made a $100 billion commitment to NVIDIA. It doesn't have $100 billion to commit. So what's happened here? NVIDIA said, you know what, we'll finance you. So effectively, NVIDIA is giving OpenAI the money that OpenAI is going to give back to NVIDIA.
Well, are you suggesting that's a scam, or are you suggesting that the timing of the way leverage works and being paid back is such that it causes these disruptions, depressions possibly, or corrections more optimistically?
If you get to a terrible moment, it's the leverage which sucks the confidence out of the system, because it's not just that there's a correction in the system, meaning it's not just that some of these stocks fall by 20 or 30%. Right. It's that if you're leveraged, you owe 3 and 4 times that.
And you can't come back.
And you can't come back.
Is that where we are?
I think that's where we are probably right now.
Now, if that isn't concerning enough, in this next clip, you're going to hear the most haunting portion of the interview, if you ask me, because in this clip, Sorkin is going to describe his interactions with the mega rich people who are in control of the economy as we speak. What are those conversations like? What are those exchanges like? He's about to tell you.
They ultimately believe that ending inequality is also an end to their, potentially to their, an end to their affluence. It's funny, for all of the talk about, increasing the size of the pie.
Yeah.
I think they also recognize that there might only be one size of the pie, and who's taking which piece is the question.
But they don't sense the resentment, much less hatred.
I think that they clearly get the resentment and the hatred. By the way, most of these people feel very alone in that way.
I see you wiping a tear away from the corner of your eye.
No, I'm not. I'm just suggesting that I think when you think about these people at the very top, I actually think they're very cognizant of the resentment. Certain people have taken a position that they just don't care.
Okay, great. I mean, if they don't care, then let's just say it with our whole chest. We don't just resent them, we hate them. They've destroyed this country and this economy. Many of them are the same crooks who have dragged this country into wars that we shouldn't be involved in on behalf of Israel. These are the worst people in the country. They don't love the country. They just see everything about what can I get out of it? How can I benefit from this? Screw the American people. These are the people who have been enabled by our political elite, who have been bought by the corporate class, right? The Epstein class. These are the donors. These are the whole, they feel so lonely. A lot of them are being outed right now in the Epstein files, which is great. I hope one day they feel lonely in a prison cell. But for now, unfortunately, we have to deal with them because we have a political class that doesn't want to rein them in at all because they're bought by them. Anyway, story just broke. We're gonna do a longer piece on this tomorrow. I want to do it with Cenk and I want to really do my research on it. But JD Vance just announced that the Trump administration will be suspending Medicaid payments entirely to the state of Minnesota. I believe the state of Minnesota and any state that is denied these resources should immediately suspend their federal taxes. Why am I paying this piece of crap, useless federal government and getting nothing out of it? F the government. Stop paying your federal taxes. These people don't deserve a freaking dime. We got to take a break. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. Impeach for Peace says Clinton and Biden voted for Iraq. Kamala, Buttigieg, and Newsom would love to vote for Iran. Can I say I agree with you, or is someone in the audience going to accuse me of being a right-wing grifter? Devin writes in and says, our system of checks and balances is about as slanted as Fox News's coverage. I mean, cable news coverage, period. Don't shoot on the goalkeeper says every single Dem trying to block this resolution should enlist and go fight this war themselves. They never would. They're expecting either you or your children to do that. Old Dirty Pastor says, I could be wrong, but I'm guessing they're just thoroughly annoyed with Roe being the rock star of the party. Oh, absolutely. They hate when anyone in the party is actually doing something and making them embarrassed over the fact that they're doing nothing. But I hope Roe keeps going. Please don't stop. For the first time in a long time, I'm feeling appreciation toward a member of Congress. That's unheard of these days. Let's go to Art Guy who says, Anna is so talented if she wanted to grift. Listen, I need you guys to understand something about grifting or me presenting myself as something I'm not. I'm literally incapable of doing it. I wish I were capable of hiding who I really am. I'm just not. I tell you exactly what I'm thinking, okay? I think the far left is detrimental to getting anything accomplished. That doesn't mean I'm a right winger. It means that I want policies that work. I want to be a little more like, I don't know, Mom Donnie. Mom Donnie had banned the homeless sweeps or whatever in New York City. And then the storm came, 20 people died on the streets. And he's like, oh, it turns out it's actually a good idea to move people indoors. And so you know what he did? He recalibrated. Instead of using cops to do it, which I don't think is the right way to do it, he has, they're kind of like social workers, reach out to people and try to get them to agree to come indoors. That is a leader. That is someone realizing, oh, you know what? It turns out I was wrong. And what I did ended up hurting people. I don't want more people to get hurt. So I'm going to recalibrate like a leader would. But the far left, they look at failure and they say, oh, give me more of it. And if you don't like that because you're on the far left, good, I don't care. But I'm never gonna lie about what I actually think. If I wanted to be a grifter, then you would see me making a lot more money. I wouldn't be sitting in my my little place, okay, doing a show online. I'd find another way to make a lot more money. Anyway, let me read the rest of Art Guy's comment. She'd be doing it from a mansion on the Amalfi Coast in Italy. Hear, hear. Sexy Speed Racer says, of course, an internal review almost always concludes no one in the IDF deserves to be punished for misdeeds. That's usually the outcome. Another radical dragon. We're running out of time. I'm not gonna have time to read this comment. I'll read it when we come back from the break. So I'll see you there. Some girl 811 says, I watched this show because all actually seem authentic. Yeah, if people haven't caught on to that yet, I don't know what to tell you. Then I was gonna read one more comment from another radical dragon who says, on blood libel, truth is not libel. If you don't want to be accused of rape, then don't rape. If you don't want people to think that it's socially acceptable in your society, then publicly punish it when it happens. The fact that you were willing to stop and do something like that in a potential combat zone is an exacerbating factor, not a mitigating one. Thank you, another radical dragon. I agree with you on that. When people call you out on behavior that's proven, it's not smearing you, it's not libel. You're being called out for bad behavior. And in this case, when it comes to that IDF story that we did, you're killing innocent aid workers and, rescuers. It's just crazy. Anyway, let's move on to our next story. Let's talk a little bit about the latest in the ongoing Epstein saga.
Think that we will ever see the files that have not been released, or even the full files, the parts that have been, the redacted or left out. And do you know how much that we haven't seen, right? How would you describe the volume that we don't yet know about?
Right, I would say we haven't seen about half, and it's the worst half. And the fact that we've seen half, and it's already stirred the conscience of this country, that shocked the conscience, shows how bad the stuff that we haven't seen is.
There are new claims that the Justice Department may be purposefully withholding the remainder of the Epstein files, specifically because they want to protect Donald Trump. Now, there could be some pretty damning documents in there that incriminate Donald Trump. I think the focus on one person or the other kind of misses the forest for the trees. But in terms of why we're not getting the full Epstein files, like what could be the actual motivating factor, I think this is a pretty good explanation. So the claim comes from a bombshell NPR investigation, which asserts that the Justice Department withheld and removed files allegedly detailing Trump sexually assaulting a minor. Now, these are allegations that Trump had sexually assaulted a minor. We know about this allegation thanks to internal FBI documents and a slideshow that was made public in the release of the Epstein files, right? But we don't have all of the information. Let me explain what I mean. So Trump's accuser claims that he pushed her head down and pressured her to perform oral sex on him while being introduced by Epstein. The woman told investigators that she retaliated against Trump by biting his penis, according to the internal FBI document. She said that Trump then punched her in the head and kicked her out of the room. Now, this incident was said to have happened in the 1980s when the accuser was just 13 years old. Her claims were clearly seen as credible. And I say that because the FBI did launch an investigation into that matter. Agents reviewed the alleged victim 4 times in 2019. Now, since they interviewed her 4 times, then we should have access to 4 separate interviews, right? Except we don't. So independent journalist Roger Solinger revealed this month that only the first interview has been released. NPR's report says only the FBI's first interview with the Trump accuser, in which she makes no allegations of wrongdoing against the president, was part of the DOJ's massive records release made public late last month. So where are the documents and notes pertaining to the other 3 interviews? We don't know. We don't have access to them. And they might exist. Like, I think there's a little bit of concern that they're being destroyed. But what we do know without a shadow of a doubt is that they have not been made public. NPR reviewed multiple sets of unique serial numbers appearing before and after the pages in question stamped onto documents in the Epstein files database. FBI case records, emails, and discovery document logs in the latest tranche of documents published at the end of January. So NPR's investigation found dozens of pages that appeared to be cataloged by the Justice Department, but not shared publicly. And that includes, by the way, more than 50 pages of FBI interviews with the accuser. And of course, the Justice Department declined to give any sort of real explanation for why they didn't release those interviews or those documents. Natalie Baldessare reiterated DOJ's stance that any documents not published are privileged, are duplicates, or relate to an ongoing federal investigation. Now, we know that Trump is not being federally investigated for this, so you can cross that out as one of the excuses for why we can't see it. Is it privileged? Why is it privileged? Additionally, when asked for comment about the missing pages and the accusations against the president, a White House spokeswoman told NPR that Trump has done more for Epstein's victims than anyone before him. That is so unbelievably insulting. Are you kidding me? The guy had to be forced to release heavily redacted and incomplete Epstein files. He literally called members of the Republican Party in for a meeting to pressure them to vote against the legislation that would force the DOJ to release the Epstein files. Lauren Boebert, one of his supporters, a Republican, was called in for that meeting because she was going to vote yes on that legislation. Luckily, he did not dissuade her. She still voted yes on that legislation. And you know what he did to her afterwards? He killed a bill. Okay, it wasn't even a bill. Congress overwhelmingly passed a measure that would fund a water project in her district in Colorado, in rural Colorado, by the way, where they desperately needed that water project. He killed it, even though the majority of members of Congress voted in favor of it. That's what he did to punish her. And this mother effer is going to tell us that he did more for Epstein victims than anyone else. He is such a disgusting, loathsome person. Following NPR's report, Democrats on the House Oversight Committee have announced investigations into this allegation and the DOJ's decision not to release the files. Ranking member Robert Garcia said in a statement, "Yesterday I reviewed unredacted evidence logs at the Department of Justice. Oversight Democrats can confirm that the DOJ appears to have illegally withheld FBI interviews with this survivor who accused President Trump of heinous crimes. Under the Oversight Committee subpoena and the Epstein Files Transparency Act, these records must immediately be shared with Congress and the American public. Covering up direct evidence of a potential assault by the President of the United States is the most serious possible crime in this White House cover-up." I want to see all of it, with the exception of private information pertaining to the survivors, which should be carefully redacted. But everything else should be released. That is what the legislation called for, and that is what we're being denied of. So, and the more Trump engages in a cover-up like this, the more guilty he looks. So he should maybe think about that as he continues making these pretty disastrous decisions. Man, Pam Bondi is a disgrace too. I mean, like, you're a woman and you're helping this guy in this cover up. Like, what are you doing? Wow. And I love the moralizing that comes from these people, right? When they talk about, like, the State of the Union yesterday, where they fearmonger about migrants. When they talk about, migrant crime. You guys are the biggest criminals ever, or at least individuals who cover up for the worst criminals ever. So how am I supposed to take them seriously when they engage in criminality themselves? Come on. Anyway, we've got another story about traffickers when we come back from the break. This story kind of, I don't know if people are aware of it. I just found out about it and it seems like a pretty big deal. So it's another sex trafficking trial that's taking place right now in Florida. I'll give you the details on that and more when we come back.
The Dow is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing.
All right, Norcross writes in and says, in defense of the everyday Israelis, not the government or those that support the atrocities of the IDF, there are protests happening there and IDF being used on protesters and those that don't want to serve in the IDF. Yeah, no, I know that there are people, ordinary people in Israel who are horrified at everything that's going on. I know that they exist. And I just want people to understand that when you support the brutalization of others, don't ever be under the impression that it's not going to turn around and be used on you, because it will be. And I think Americans are realizing that when it comes to how ICE has been deployed in various cities across the country. And the brutality of the IDF is now being turned around on the Israeli people. And it's disgusting. I don't know how you save that society. There is complete and utter rot in the Israeli government. Yair Lapid was just boasting about pursuing the Greater Israel Project. That's the liberal opposition to Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't know, man. Okay, let's keep going. Thank you to Ride the Spiral, who gifted a TYT membership. And thank you to Josh, who gifted another TYT membership. Mark Francis says, when your taxi driver gives you tips on stocks, it's time to get out of the market. I have not experienced that yet, but anyway. All right, Joe NY says, and I agree, we should be allowed to have some control of not paying into a system that has bailed on us. Why are we paying this much in taxes? They don't deserve a cent. I totally agree. No. If Trump's administration is going to play this game where they're going to punish blue cities or blue states by denying them programs and benefits that our freaking taxes paid into, we shouldn't pay our federal taxes. We shouldn't pay our federal taxes. It's that simple. Well, why am I paying you? So you can use that money to enrich yourself or go to war or help Israel? You're gonna deny Americans Medicare? You're gonna deny Americans Medicare. Okay, let's see how that works out for you mother effers. JD Vance making this announcement, this freaking faux populist. Oh, JD Vance, he's the anti-war, anti-interventionist. Yeah, right. He's garbage, okay? That's what he is. He's absolute, utter garbage. And Democrats better get their act straight, okay? Because if they roll out some milquetoast piece of crap to go up against the Republicans and then just demand that every voter bow their head and worship whoever they prop up, it's not gonna work. So get your heads right and actually represent the people. Anyway, Allie writes in and says, this is a lot to take in, but so important. Thank you, Anna, and your team. Thank you, I appreciate that. Oh, wow, super.
Do you view Vice President JD Vance as your successor?
No.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back. All these super chats came in. Our chat was glitchy today. It's a YouTube issue, not our issue. But now that I see the comments, I want to do right by our viewers and read as many of these super chats as I can. Let me start off with user error 5, who says, it's crazy that the government won't allow a private company like Anthropic to impose their own regulations and is threatening to nationalize it. Very capitalist. I know, it's amazing. Dav Mill says, did you see what guns West Virginia is considering selling to the public under state authority? Dav, I did not see that story, but I'm now very curious and I'll look into it. Box says, chat is broken. Hopefully chat is no longer broken. Gummy Riot says, I definitely appreciate TYT bringing honest news. Thanks for staying real, Anna. Thank you, I appreciate that. C Cat writes in, and C-Cat the Third, G-Cat the Third, great show today from Becky, your biggest fan. Love you, Becky. Thank you for watching. Make it make sense. 1988 says, forget boycotting of companies. It's time to boycott the federal government. Boston Tea Party 2.0. I think it's time. No taxation without representation. We got to find a way to do it, man. But it has to be organized. It won't work if you just have like a few people refusing to pay their federal taxes. Titan of Olympus 03 says, I've been saying this for a while. AI will cripple jobs and devastate the economy. It's great at automation, but it isn't what they are selling it as. And when it becomes clear that it will never develop or deliver, the bubble will burst. Especially for the AI companies that are over leveraged. If they're not able to deliver, they're in a lot of trouble. We'll probably bail them out though. Free meatballs and linguine, which sounds so good right now. Anna, you are clearly quite intelligent. If you wanted to grift, I'm sure you would. I would be in finance. I'm not in finance. Do you guys understand how easy it would be to be rich if I just worked in finance? But anyway, I'm sure you would have a better plan than spending nearly 2 decades at TYT. We are lucky to have you and your insight. Thank you. I appreciate it. I love what I do. I do it because I love it. I don't do finance because it seems awful. And there are better things in life than being rich. Without further ado, though, let's talk about this insane story that I came across not too long ago. And I think you should know about it because there seems to be some parallels to things we've been talking about on the show lately. Let's get into it.
It was evil. I say like he looked like he was possessed.
Like a nightmare that never goes away, Maria Suska says she will never forget what she just recently told police happened one night 10 years ago.
The more I said stop, the more he got violent with me.
She's talking about Orrin Alexander, the infamous real estate powerhouse who she told Miami Beach police raped her.
He went from this charming gentleman to this evil predator attacker.
He and his brothers Alon and Tal come from a powerful and wealthy family.
Well, the brothers in that powerful and wealthy family are now being accused of human trafficking, sex trafficking, and are standing trial in the state of Florida. In fact, federal prosecutors are pursuing these charges against 3 brothers in one of the largest sex trafficking cases in US history. The men stand accused of sexually preying on and abusing women in Florida and New York for over a decade. Now, they have denied these allegations, which is why they're standing trial. And I'm so curious to see how this plays out. Now, on the outside, these men were just tremendously successful. They had built careers in the luxury real estate market. But behind the scenes, according to the prosecutors, the sibling trio used their wealth and influence to sexually abuse women. So Alon, Orrin, and Tal Alexander face a combined 12 federal counts in a conspiracy that prosecutors say dates back to at least 2009. So Orrin and Alon Alexander are 38-year-old twins. Their brother Tal Alexander is a year older than them. He's 39 years old. Tal and Orrin Alexander co-founded a real estate company specializing in luxury properties in New York, Miami, and Los Angeles. And then Alon Alexander went to law school and worked as an executive at their family's private security company. More on that in just a bit. So they do stand accused of some pretty serious allegations here, including drugging, sexually assaulting, and yes, raping dozens of women. Some of the survivors are underaged. The crimes allegedly involved multiple perpetrators, and prosecutors say that the assaults were premeditated and planned in advance. So they claim that because the allegations include flying these women to fancy vacation destinations under the guise of exclusive travel opportunities. But then once they travel there, the women are, and in some cases girls, are allegedly abused. And honestly, it just sounds very familiar. It sounds kind of familiar to the P. Diddy trial. It sounds familiar to Jeffrey Epstein. How widespread is this? Now, look, they might be totally innocent. They're still standing trial, and we live in a judicial system where someone is innocent until proven guilty, right? So just keep that in mind. But I do want to go over some of the allegations. At least 8 accusers are expected to testify, including a woman who was 16 years old at the time of her alleged assault. The brothers face sentences ranging from 15 years to life in prison if convicted. Now, they're not allowing cameras in the courtroom, but there are reporters there, and I've been watching some of their reports immediately following the proceedings. And there was a victim who did testify, the one that I just referred to, who says that she was 16 at the time of her alleged assault. So in her opening statements, you have the prosecutor, Madison Smizer, who was, by the way, one of the prosecutors for the Diddy trial. Here's what she says. For years, they wanted to lure in girls with promises of parties and trips. And when they got there, the defendants raped them. The brothers used whatever means necessary, sometimes drugs, alcohol, sometimes brute force, to carry out their rapes. Some of the victims were underage and said no. Some were incoherent, but none of that mattered to the brothers because they were going to have sex with these victims no matter what. For over a decade, they masqueraded as party boys when really they were predators. Now, again, remember, that is the opening statement coming from the prosecutor in this case. There was actually a new charge, though, of sexual abuse that was added in the most recent superseding indictment. And it alleges that Orrin Alexander and his twin brother, Alon, sexually abused someone who was physically incapacitated. According to prosecutors, the alleged assault of a woman who was physically incapable of declining participation occurred around January of 2012 aboard a Bahamian flagged cruise ship that departed from and returned to the United States. And women are testifying in this trial. So, for instance, another woman who testified under a pseudonym, Katie Moore, that's not her real name, that's what pseudonym means, said that she was drugged and raped by Alon Alexander after a night in New York City. Apparently they went dancing. The next thing I remember is coming to instantly like a switch. And I was laying naked across a bed with Alon standing over me, who was naked as well. In that moment, I had no idea what happened. I tried to get out of bed a few times, but Alon kept pushing me back down. Finally, he sat down on the bed and I said I was able to get up. And I said, I don't want to have sex with you. And he said, you already did. Absolutely horrific. So the charges the men are facing are, by the way, not even related to Moore. Moore decided not to pursue charges. She says that she didn't want this rape to define her future, which is probably why she's willing to testify under a pseudonym. But lawyers for the defense argue that while the men did in fact have sex with some of the women, it wasn't rape, that it was totally consensual. So Tenny Garagos, who's the defense attorney for the men, argues that this case is about shame, opportunity, and money. Nice, Tenny. The truth is something far more ordinary. 3 brothers, successful, yes. Ambitious, yes. Social, yes. Single men who liked and pursued women at nightclubs, bars, restaurants, and apps. That is not trafficking. That is dating. That is hooking up. And Deanna Paul, who is representing Tal Alexander, acknowledged that the brothers were womanizers, but said there is no evidence her client actually unlawfully or acted unlawfully toward the women. Not good. You know what else isn't good? The fact that the men are now being held without bail in Miami. So seems like the judge might be concerned that they're a flight risk. They're also facing a ton of civil suits, and those suits will probably come up after the federal case against them wraps up. But it just started, so I'm sure we'll learn more moving forward. Now, the three accused brothers do have an interesting family history. So they have a fourth brother named Neve Alexander. He is not accused of any wrongdoing. I want to be very, very clear about that. But he does go to watch the trial. He's married to someone named Cassie Arison, who happens to be the heiress of the Carnival Cruise empire. And Cassie, is also known as a publisher, philanthropist, and art collector. She founded the Tel Aviv-based magazine As Promised. Now, her mother, Sherry Arison, is the richest woman in Israel with an estimated wealth of $5 billion. And Sherry was a controlling shareholder of Bank Hapoalim, Israel's largest bank, which I'm obviously not familiar with. And the bank faced major US investigations and had to pay an $800 million settlement to resolve US probes tied to tax evasion by US clients. So a lot of interesting things happening there. I think we'll be following the trial. I'll be giving you some information about it as it develops. The Alexander brothers' parents, Shlomi and Orly Alexander, owned a private security company in Miami called Kent Security Services. So this is a very well-connected, affluent family. The three brothers aren't just facing allegations from one or two women. There are many women, and these allegations date back to over a decade. So we'll see how it plays out. But pretty scary stuff. It's scary to see what people are capable of when they think they can act with impunity, when they think they can get away with it. If these allegations are proven to be true, of course. All right, I'm gonna read some comments before we wrap up the show. We will have a bonus episode for our members. I want to talk a little bit about Kash Patel's shenanigans in Milan. And let's see, what else do we got? Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. We might have some other stories to cover. But for now, we've got Konstantin Kaviris who says, what does the Dow have to do with Epstein? Oh, the Dow. That makes just a little sense. So he wrote Dow, DAO at first, which is funny. Dana Brecht says, I've seriously thought about denouncing my US citizenship in order to be able to stop paying taxes. I don't want you to do that. I think that it is special and valuable to be an American. And I'm proud to be an American. I hate my government. I don't think that my government is indicative of what this country is. When I think about my country, I think about the people in this country and what we are capable of. So I don't think you need to do that, but I really want to find a way to do a modern version of the Tea Party. Mohit writes in and says, what is the ideal situation? What steps needed in an ideal world where we don't go to war with Iran, say F you to Netanyahu, but also have regime change for citizens that isn't the monarchy, but a liberal Muslim democracy? Mohit, I love you, but it is not our job to do regime change or to spur regime change. It's up to the Iranian people, okay? It is never helpful for a foreign country to come in and decide who the leader of, Iran should be or any other country should be. I hear what you're saying, and my heart breaks for the Iranians who want better leadership. I think our time, though, is best served in focusing on Americans getting better leadership in our government, okay? We should control what we can control and not meddle in other countries' business. That's my take on it. And besides which, the regime change isn't really meant to be carried out on behalf of the Iranian people. It's meant to be carried out on behalf of Israel's interests, and that is a disaster. All right, we've got 2 more minutes. Let's go to a few more comments. All right, let's go to Willie Kitt. Becky proclaimed biggest fan. You just read a comment from my hubby, GCat, who I made turn this on so you could educate him about the market. LOL, I love TYT. Tiger Lily says, Rump has been a criminal his whole life, and how soon we've forgotten that he is a convicted sexual abuser. He did lose that civil case. That's true. And Rob3 Chatsworth says, if guilty, these guys need to die in prison. And I know I'm not supposed to agree with things like that, but I agree. Anyway, we don't need people like that in society, preying on people, including underage girls. They're disgusting. Again, if proven to be true. All right, guys. So in our bonus episode for our members, we're going to talk a little bit about this whole debacle involving our FBI director traveling to Milan to party. His use of taxpayer resources to party, and just how bad he is at his job. Honestly, Kash Patel has been way worse than I think even the right expected. And I'm going to explain how in the bonus episode for our members. Again, that's tyt.com/join, and we'll see you there.